I never meant to linger, but something in the way she stood there made time stretch longer than it should. The late afternoon sun fell across her hair, strands catching light like fine gold threads, and when she looked at me, even for a second, it was impossible to pretend she was just another woman. She wasn't. Her name was Nadia. She was in her mid-40s, graceful in a way that didn't announce itself. It crept up on you, left you staring, then ashamed that you couldn't look away. I had been washing her car, my hands still dripping with water when she walked closer, the faint scent of jasmine trailing with her. She didn't need to say anything. The curve of her mouth, the small pause before her words, those were enough to tighten something in my chest. "You're careful," she said quietly, her voice smooth, thoughtful. "Most people just rush it." I shrugged, suddenly too aware of the water sliding down my arm. "I don't like leaving things half done." Her gaze lingered on me longer than it should have. Not a stare, but not casual either, as though she was weighing something behind her calm expression. She reached past me for a cloth, her fingers brushing mine for half a breath. It was nothing. It was everything. I swallowed, pretending not to notice, but my hand stayed frozen in midair long after she had pulled away. The air between us grew heavy, quiet enough to hear the soft rustle of leaves outside the gate, the dripping water pooling beneath the tires. She didn't fill the silence. She just stood there, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind that made her beauty sharper, more real. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled. Instead, I bent back to the car, letting the sponge glide over the glass in slow, unnecessary circles. My reflection blurred in the wet surface, but hers, just a little behind me, was clear, watching. "Do you always help like this?" she asked, softer this time. "Only when someone needs it," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was true. Maybe I would have found any excuse just to be near her. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a secret she wasn't ready to share. She reached again, steadying the bucket with her hand. Her wrist brushed against mine, wet against warm skin. Neither of us moved back. A drop of water rolled from my sleeve onto her hand, and without thinking, I murmured, "Sorry." She didn't pull away. Her eyes lifted, meeting mine with a stillness that made my chest tighten. For a moment, the world narrowed to that small contact, the soft line of her mouth, the quiet that asked for something neither of us dared to give. The air held it, that fragile almost, until it was broken. A door creaked open from inside the house. Heavy footsteps echoed faintly against the tiled floor, moving closer. Nadia's hand slipped away, the warmth gone as quickly as it had come. She stepped back, her face smoothing into composure, but her eyes flickered, a brief, unspoken question hanging in them. I stood there, dripping, the sponge in my hand useless, my pulse caught in the space she had left behind. And when the footsteps grew louder, almost at the doorway, her gaze found mine again, steady, charged, impossible to ignore. Then the door opened wide. The door swung open and Nadia's sister passed by without much notice, carrying a tray of folded laundry. The interruption was brief, but it scattered the fragile silence we'd been holding, forcing both of us into safer ground. Still, the air between us refused to clear. Nadia walked to the garden wall, her fingers brushing a cluster of pale roses, pretending to admire them. I went back to rinsing the hood of her car, though my hands moved slower, distracted. Every so often, I glanced up. She wasn't looking at the flowers. She was watching me. It wasn't the first time. I'd caught her before, lingering, just for seconds too long. And every time, she carried that same guarded expression, like she'd stepped somewhere she shouldn't and wasn't sure how to return. She had been married once, I knew that much. People talked. Her husband had left years ago, the story always shifting depending on who told it. Business troubles, another woman, something else. What remained was that she lived here with her sister, her world quieter than it must have once been. I'd never asked her about it. I wasn't sure I had the right. But sometimes, in the middle of these small moments, it pressed against the silence between us, the weight of what she didn't say. I tried to look away, focus on the car, but my mind betrayed me. I noticed everything. The way the sun lit her hair, how her blouse clung at her shoulder, the faint sound of her breath when she drew closer. It wasn't fair how easily she unsettled me. "You're quieter today," she said suddenly, stepping closer again. Her voice was light, but I caught the carefulness under it. I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the sponge in my hand. "I guess I don't know what to say sometimes." Her laugh was soft, a little tired. "That makes two of us." I risked a glance. She was standing so near that her shoulder brushed mine as she reached for the cloth lying on the hood. The contact was brief, but enough to send heat rushing up my arm. She didn't move away immediately. Instead, she let her hand rest there a moment longer than necessary, the weight of it quiet but undeniable. I held still, afraid to breathe too deeply. She must have felt the tension in me, because her hand slipped away almost reluctantly, her eyes flicking down as though she had broken her own rule. "It's not simple," she murmured, almost to herself. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. The years between us were obvious, the way people might see us even more so. And yet, in that moment, all of it felt distant compared to the closeness of her standing there, half turned toward me, her perfume threading through the air like something meant only for me. I forced myself to move, to wring out the sponge, to give her space. But when I straightened, she hadn't stepped back. Her eyes held mine, steady, as if daring me to speak what neither of us could. My throat tightened. I didn't. Instead, I felt it, her hand brushing the back of mine, so light it might have been an accident. But she didn't pull away quickly. She let it linger, a small rebellion, just long enough to burn into memory. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between us. Not words, not promises, just a quiet recognition that whatever this was, it was no longer something either of us could pretend away. The late afternoon shadows stretched across the driveway, the car now gleaming clean beneath the fading light. I should have packed up the bucket, thanked her, and left. That would have been the reasonable thing. But neither of us moved. Nadia leaned against the garden wall, her arms folded loosely, though her posture betrayed something more fragile, a hesitation, like she wanted to step closer but held herself back. I wiped my hands on the cloth, pretending to focus, though every nerve in me was trained on her. The silence was thick, humming with something unsaid. "You don't have to stay," she said softly, though she didn't look at me when she spoke. "I don't mind," I replied. My voice came out lower than I intended. Her gaze lifted then, locking with mine. For a moment, the world stilled. She took a half step forward, and the distance between us collapsed into a breath's width. I could smell her perfume again, faint jasmine mixed with sun-warmed skin. My pulse hammered, loud enough I thought she might hear it. Her hand hovered near my arm, not touching, but close enough that my skin burned in anticipation. Then the sudden trill of a phone shattered the stillness. The sharp sound came from the table inside the house, urgent, insistent. She startled slightly, pulling her hand back as if the world had snapped her awake. "It's my sister's," she whispered quickly, eyes flicking toward the open doorway. Footsteps echoed faintly inside, moving closer. We both froze. The steps neared, and for a terrifying second, I thought her sister would step out and find us standing too close, faces too unguarded. But the footsteps turned down the hallway instead, fading toward another room. The phone stopped ringing. We exhaled together, the release of tension almost dizzying. She let out a small laugh, not of amusement, but of nerves, of escape. I caught the tremor in it, the way she pressed her hand against her wrist as if steadying herself. "That was close," I murmured, and she glanced at me, eyes wide, then quickly away. "We can't," she started, then let the words hang unfinished. I nodded, though my body betrayed me, leaning subtly toward her. She noticed. Her lips parted slightly, her breath brushing the space between us. It was unbearable, the almost of it. The way her eyes flicked to my mouth, then away. The trembling pause before either of us could make a choice. My hand lifted, hovering near her cheek, but I didn't dare touch. Seconds stretched like hours. The quiet pressed down, filled with everything we couldn't admit aloud. Guilt, fear, desire, tangled into one unsteady heartbeat. Her shoulders rose and fell in a shaky breath. "This isn't supposed to happen," she whispered, but she didn't move away. I should have. I didn't. Instead, we stood there, impossibly close, close enough that if either of us leaned the slightest bit more, the fragile line between us would break. And though the world outside carried on, cars passing distantly, voices faint from the street, in that suspended moment, there was only her, only me, and the charged silence that refused to let us step back. The sun had dipped lower, leaving the garden in a softer half-light. The car gleamed forgotten, and the water in the bucket had stilled, reflecting fragments of sky. Neither of us cared anymore. Nadia stood close enough that I could see the quick rise and fall of her chest. She wasn't hiding it now, the trembling in her hands, the unsteady rhythm of her breathing. And for once, I didn't try to hide either. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, her voice hushed, almost fragile. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Because I can't help it." Her lips parted as though she'd answer, but no words came. Instead, she turned her face slightly, as if fighting some inner pull. The silence dragged heavy, and the longer it lasted, the more unbearable it became. "People would never understand," she whispered finally, eyes fixed on the ground. "You're young. You." I cut in, stepping closer. "You're the only one I see." The words left me before I could think, raw and dangerous. Her head snapped up, and her eyes locked with mine, startled, wounded, but undeniably alive. For the first time, she didn't retreat. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed against my sleeve. Slowly, almost painfully, her fingers slid down until they found my wrist. The touch was feather-light, but it anchored me more than anything ever had. I moved before I could second-guess it, my hand rising to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My fingers grazed the warmth of her cheek, and she stilled, utterly still, except for the quiver in her breath. "Nadia," my voice came out low, rough, as if the air itself resisted me. She closed her eyes for the briefest second, as though the sound of her name in my mouth undid her. When she opened them again, her gaze was no longer guarded. It was bare. "You don't know what you're doing," she murmured, though her body leaned infinitesimally closer, betraying her. "Then tell me to stop," I whispered back. But she didn't. The distance between us thinned until her shoulder brushed my chest, until I could feel the warmth radiating off her, smell the faint trace of jasmine and soap clinging to her skin. My hand trembled slightly where it lingered at her jawline, thumb brushing the soft curve just below her ear. She tilted her head a fraction, eyes half closed, and for one suspended breath, it was inevitable. My heart pounded so loud I thought the whole street could hear it. "Nadia," I said again, this time a plea. Her lips parted, her breath warm against mine. We hovered there, one heartbeat away from crossing the line we had both been circling for too long. And then, a sharp knock rattled the front gate. The sound cracked through the silence, jolting us apart just enough. She stepped back, eyes wide, breath unsteady, her hand still trembling where it had touched me. We both turned toward the gate, but neither of us moved to open it. The moment hung heavy between us, half broken, half unfinished, a question left dangling in the air. The knock at the gate lingered in the air even after it stopped. Nadia's hand trembled at her side, her chest rising unevenly, as though she was holding back more than just breath. Finally, she stepped forward, her heels clicking against the stone path. She reached for the latch, but paused, pressing her palm flat against the cool iron as if steadying herself. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "It's not the first time someone's asked about you." The words froze me. She didn't turn, but her shoulders stiffened. My sister noticed. She asked why you always come around. Why I let you. The ground seemed to shift beneath me. I thought of the lingering stares, the quiet moments stretched too long, the way I'd stayed without reason. Of course someone would have seen. "And what did you tell her?" I asked, my voice tight. Nadia turned then, slowly, her eyes dark in the fading light. "I told her you were just helping. Nothing more." She swallowed hard, her throat moving visibly. But she didn't believe me. The admission hit like a stone in my chest. The world that had felt suspended, ours alone, suddenly cracked open to judgment, to exposure. I stepped closer without meaning to, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine as she shifted. The contact was small, accidental, but the charge of it only deepened the weight of her words. "You lied for me," I said quietly. Her eyes flicked to mine, then down again. "I lied for myself," she whispered. Something in the way she said it, fragile, raw, unraveled me. I reached for her without thinking, my hand hovering near her arm, almost touching, but I hesitated. She looked at my hand, then at me, her expression torn between fear and longing. "This can't stay hidden," she murmured. "If anyone finds out, I don't care." I cut in, too quickly. Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then she stepped closer, close enough that I felt the warmth of her against me, the faint tremor in her body. Her hand brushed against mine, not quite holding, but not pulling away either. "I care," she said, voice low but unsteady. "Because I know what it will cost me." The words should have stopped me, but instead, they pressed me nearer. My hand finally found her arm, fingers grazing the soft skin just above her elbow. She shivered, not from cold, but from something neither of us could name aloud. For a moment, it was all too much. The fear of being caught, the weight of her lie, the raw closeness of her standing there, trembling but not retreating. Her eyes searched mine, desperate, almost pleading, as though she wanted me to either step back or close the distance completely. I didn't do either. Instead, I whispered, "Then what do we do now?" She exhaled shakily, her lips parting, and with that single breath, the question between us shifted into something dangerous, irreversible. And as the light faded, her silence was the only answer, heavy, unspoken, pulling us toward the inevitable. The garden was almost dark now, the last strands of daylight clinging to the sky. The car, the gate, the world beyond us. All of it faded. What remained was her, standing so close that every breath I took seemed to belong to her too. Nadia's hands were clenched at her sides, as though she was fighting herself. I could see it in her eyes, the storm of hesitation, the fear of being seen, of being judged. But beneath it was something else, something stronger, want. I stepped closer, just enough that our shoulders brushed. Her breath caught. "We can't," she began, voice trembling. "I know," I said, my throat tight. "But I can't walk away." Her head tilted, and for a long moment, she just stared at me. It wasn't the gaze of someone amused, or flattered, or even reckless. It was a gaze that saw everything. My youth, my certainty, my hunger, my fear, and held it without looking away. "Do you even understand what this means?" she whispered. "No," I admitted, my voice low, "but I know what it feels like." I lifted a hand slowly, giving her time to stop me. She didn't. My fingers brushed against her jaw, tracing lightly until they rested just beneath her ear. Her eyes fluttered shut for half a second, then opened again, wide and unguarded. Her body leaned the smallest fraction closer. My chest almost touched hers, my breath mingling with the warmth of hers. She trembled, not from cold, but from the choice pressing down on both of us. "This will ruin me," she said, her words breaking on a fragile edge. I shook my head, my forehead nearly touching hers. "No, it'll ruin me if you walk away." The silence that followed was unbearable, thick and pulsing with everything unsaid. And then, slowly, hesitantly, her hand lifted. She touched my chest, right above my heart, her palm flat against me as if testing its rhythm. It thudded wildly under her touch. Her lips parted. For a suspended breath, the world stopped. And then she closed the distance. It wasn't a desperate kiss, not at first. It was slow, trembling, like she was testing the line even as she crossed it. My hand slid into her hair, her fingers tightened against me, and all the fear, guilt, and hesitation dissolved into something undeniable. When she finally pulled back, her forehead rested against mine, her breath uneven. Her eyes shone in the dim light, raw and vulnerable. "There's no going back now," she whispered. "I don't want to," I replied, steady this time. And in that moment, clarity settled between us. The risk remained. The world outside still waited to judge, but here, in the quiet garden, We understood each other fully, not with words, but with the closeness we could no longer deny. The night had fully settled by the time the tension eased from our shoulders. The garden lights flickered on, soft golden halos against the dark, and for once, the world outside felt far away. Nadia still stood close, her hand resting against my chest as though she hadn't realized she'd left it there. My fingers were tangled lightly in hers now, neither of us willing to let go. For a while, we just breathed together, no words, no explanations. And maybe that was enough. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than the hum of the crickets in the bushes. This shouldn't have happened. I nodded, though my hand tightened around hers. Maybe not, but it did. She looked at me then, and for the first time, there was no mask, no guarded distance. Just her, tired, vulnerable, and achingly real. You're so young, she whispered, shaking her head slightly, but not pulling away. You don't know how the world will look at this. I don't care, I said gently. Let them look. I only care how you look at me. Her eyes softened, though a faint crease of worry lingered at her brow. I lifted my other hand and brushed it away with my thumb. She closed her eyes at the touch, leaning into it almost instinctively. Why do you make it sound so simple? She murmured. Because it feels simple when it's just us, I replied. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, not playful, but tired, grateful. She exhaled slowly and then did something she hadn't before. She leaned fully into me, her head resting against my shoulder. The weight of her there, trusting me, was heavier than any kiss. I wrapped my arms around her carefully, holding her as if she might vanish if I wasn't gentle enough. She stayed, her hands sliding to the small of my back, grounding herself. In that embrace, words seemed unnecessary. The fear was still there, of whispers, of judgment, of the age between us, but it no longer felt like a wall. It felt like something we could carry together. When she finally pulled back, it wasn't far. She kept her forehead against mine, her breath warm and steady. Her fingers intertwined with mine deliberately this time, no hesitation. We'll have to be careful, she said softly. Then we'll be careful, I replied. And patient, she added, the weight of her voice heavier now. Then I'll be patient, I promised. Her smile deepened just a little, her thumb brushing across my hand as if sealing it. And for the first time since that first accidental touch earlier that afternoon, she seemed at peace with it, with us. We sat together on the garden bench afterward, not speaking much, just close enough that our shoulders touched. Every so often, her hand would tighten around mine, and I would squeeze back. It was quiet, imperfect, but real. And as the night carried on, one truth settled between us like a vow neither of us had to say aloud. We had chosen each other. Sparkles, did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? 29.